Hi, I'm Dr. Richard Visser, and in this podcast, I will take you on a journey through the wilderness of scientific research and experiential knowledge. Together, we will clear a path to optimizing health, well-being, and longevity. I am a former Minister of Health and Sports with a PhD in medical sciences, a published researcher in the fields of obesity, lifestyle medicine, and longevity. I started my career path over 3 decades ago as a doctor of chiropractic. I'm excited to share my methods, know-how, and experience with you. So please join me on the Visser Podcast. Welcome to another episode of the Visser Podcast. Today we're going to do a deep dive into the biggest killers, particularly one. So what are the 4 big killers? Shorten our lives. And we all have had someone, know someone that's been through this. Number 1, far above all, cardiovascular disease and cerebral vascular disease. Number 2 is cancer. 3 is neurodegenerative disease, which is Alzheimer's, dementia, and Parkinson's. And the last one, metabolic disease, so diabetes, insulin resistance, NAFD, so non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, and more. But today, we're going to basically do a deep dive into cardiovascular disease, the leading cause of death globally. 17.9 million people a year die of this. I know it personally. My father died of it. My father had a heart attack when I was 8. He was 42 and passed away. So it's been part of me and, part of my own struggle with health to make sure that I don't have that, although it's in my family. My father had it. So we're going to look at it. We're going to look at how we can detect it. We're going to look at what we need to look at as far as labs go. And it's very different than you think. Because, let me give you an anecdotal story. A friend of mine decides to, start running marathons and short marathons and whatever, and gets a heart attack. And you've heard this. The guy looks like he's in shape. He looks like he's good. He's not overweight. He's not obese. He doesn't have any of the risk factors. You think, so how come? Or how come another person I know goes to do his annual checkups every year, still gets a heart attack, has to put a stent in? Why didn't they see this? Do heart attacks happen that quickly? Can it happen that quickly? Well, no. It takes 20 to 30 years for it to build up in the arteries. So why aren't we detecting it? So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about some serious stuff and where kind of medicine has kind of missed the boat a little bit. So let's dive right into it. So when we look at cardiovascular disease, we're looking at mostly heart attacks and stroke. Those are the big 2, but there's a big list. And the list goes like this: coronary artery disease, stroke, heart failure, hypertensive heart disease, rheumatic heart disease, cardiomyopathy, abnormal heart rhythms, congenital heart disease, valvular heart disease, carditis, aortic aneurysms, peripleural artery disease, thromboembolic disease, venous thrombosis, and it goes on. Yeah, but the big 2, heart attack and strokes. That's what we hear. That's what we know. So I'm going to stay out of the weeds a bit. I want to keep you interested. I want to keep you involved in this episode. So I'm going to try to do this with the least amount of details possible to get you to what you need to know. All right? So let's start. So what are the risk factors? Physical inactivity. You're not doing what we talked about in the episodes prior to this. Bad diet, tobacco and alcohol use. Those are the 3 that are kind of constant. Anywhere you look, that's what you're going to get. However, how do they show up as? They show up as overweight and obesity. Huge. Not only overweight and obesity is for cardiovascular disease, but also cancer and the rest of them. So what else? We're looking at high blood pressure, high blood glucose, high blood lipids, diabetes. Well, why? Well, diabetes affects the heart cells and our vascular system. So it plays a role, plays a big role. So we're going to discuss this because we're going to dive into, and the reason I want to say this is because it all has to do with each other. Not one of them is separated. It all has interplays. Okay, so what we talk about now are all these interplays. So when we look at the difference between women and men usually get the heart attack or the cardiovascular, the strokes in midlife, right? Women, on the other hand, have much less risk in midlife. And why is that? Because they're premenopausal. And when women are premenopausal, they still have estrogen working and protecting them. What does estrogen do? Well, estrogen protects glucose metabolism. Estrogen improves the endothelial cell functions, and the endothelial cells are in the lining of, your arteries. So this is all the protective effects of estrogen as we know it. After menopause, though, and so at this point, men have 2 to 5 times more complications than women in the middle age. But after women pass menopause, all of a sudden the odds even out. All right? So that we should know this. This is one of the roles. This is when the women should be really checking and being careful about their diet and all the risk factors. So some other diseases that have an effect. Untreated celiac disease, and the way to treat that is a gluten-free diet. Sleep also. So these are also some risk factors that you need to look at. And sleep, we're talking, there's research has been, if you're doing less than 7 hours a night, your risk increases by 10 to 30% for cardiovascular disease. Pretty significant. So you get the big picture. So how do we screen for this? Because we all take blood tests and, we go to the doctor and they give us a complete blood test. Well, it's not as complete as we think. The standardized blood tests really are not enough. And this is why. And the way we read them, your physician reads them, can also be an issue. So when we do what we call a lipid panel, we're looking at total cholesterol, we're looking at triglycerides, VLDL, HDL, and LDL. And we've all heard HDL is the good cholesterol, LDL is the bad cholesterol. Not really. Cholesterol is not bad. We need cholesterol, okay? The difference between HDL and LDL, high density lipoprotein, low density lipoprotein, is actually the protein, the package that's around the cholesterol. All right, the package is the problem. And so when the package is of low density and small, it's able to penetrate the walls of the arteries. So that's why, from the beginning, I think in time, we were all looking at total cholesterol. Well, we know now that doesn't mean much. So we stopped looking at total cholesterol. Then we started looking at LDL, the bad cholesterol. Well, LDL also in it has bigger particles, right? So you have bigger particles and you have the smaller particles. Now, when you're looking at LDL, you don't know how much bigger or smaller particles you have. So high LDL might be okay. Low LDL might be an issue, depending on how many of these small toxic particles you have, potentially toxic particles you have. So what do we do then? What's the interplay here? Well, if we look at, this is the first one. If we look at triglycerides and VLDL, this is made in the liver. So the liver turns sugar into fat. The liver plays a big role. And so does the pancreas. So we're not, the pancreas, of course, creates insulin. But we're going to look at this. I'm not going to go too deep. Don't worry. Just follow me on this. Because you need to know a little bit before I explain what tests are and what you need to do with them. So the first one that I think is interesting here is, and more effective than looking at LDL, is the ratio between HDL and triglycerides. Okay, that ratio gives us a better view of how bad your situation is, how bad your lipids are. Okay, so that's the first clue. So when we look at that, we want, of course, triglycerides to be, less than 100, and you want the ratio to be less than 1. But that, your physician will look at that, of course. So the other thing that we have to understand is that insulin is a hormone that stores fat. All right? So if insulin is high, your fat goes to visceral fat, it goes to organ fat, and it goes to subcutaneous fat. Some of the fat you can see on the body, some of you can't. Fatty liver, you can't see. All right? And as we discussed before, fatty liver disease is one that is extremely dangerous. And in the past, what we've seen with fatty liver disease, it was always an alcoholic problem. So people that have alcohol, so older men, women that drank too much had fatty liver. And what we've seen lately is that young people have it. So we have a new term for it, and it's non-alcohol related fatty liver disease. And so when the liver is fat, it can't function. The liver is your filter system for your whole body. If you have a fatty liver, it's going to spike insulin. It's going to basically just wreak havoc to your body. All right? But we'll get back to that. We'll get back to that because it's an important one. It has to do with the pancreas. Now, we know the pancreas is where we produce insulin. The body has two portals. Portals meaning like channels between organs, okay? One of them is between the pancreas and the liver, okay? So it's sensitive. They sense each other, all right? If the liver is fatty, if the liver is not working well, the pancreas says, produce more insulin, which is a huge problem, okay? This is the function of the portal. So when insulin starts increasing, we've got coronary artery, we've got prostate problems, we've got brain dementia, we even have breast tissue issues, and we got cancer coming in. So the fatty liver is one that we really have to look at. We have to look at the liver. And so you ask, so what causes a fatty liver? Sugar. Yep. Sugar and carbs and foods in packages, ultra processed foods. All these things cause fatty liver, and that's why we're seeing it in younger people. So let's go back to the testing side. Okay, so when we look at the blood, we need the HDL to triglyceride ratio. That's our first one. The other test we need to do is a HOMA-IR. And that's testing us for insulin sensitivity. It's a test we need to ask for because the insulin is key here with everything. And we're going to see this even a little deeper. And you got to hang with me with this. So the other test that we want to do is ApoB. Now ApoB you're not going to get if you don't ask for it because it's a separate test. You need to ask for it. And why is ApoB so important? Well, ApoB is the protein that envelops around the bad LDL, IDL, and VLDL. So these are the ones that potentially can cause issues with our arteries. So, and there's only one ApoB per LDL, a bad LDL. So it gives us a good idea, much better idea, much more accurate idea, how our LDL is doing in our body. Are we the bad LDL? Are we getting to a point where we need to do something about it? Is it too high? So ApoB is a much better indicator. Now, does ApoB 100% tell us that we're going to have problems in our arteries? No, because if we don't have any inflammation, if we don't have any, oxidative stress, and we'll look at this in the arteries, in our system, ApoB will just kind of go through the endothelial lining and pass through the cells of the lining of the arteries, and there's really no problem. But when inflammation and ApoB come together, or oxidative stress, which causes inflammation, when they come together, now we have a problem. Okay, so ApoB, a good one, much better than looking at LDL, okay? Also superior to HDL triglycerides. The HOMA-AR we have, and now there's one more, Lp(a). Now Lp(a), we need to do once, and we really need to, we're doing it because we want to see if we're genetically predisposed to having high LDL, to having a lot of bad LDL in our bodies. And so if our Lp(a) is elevated, the more forward thinking of the physicians that are in this field is we need to attack, aggressively treat LDL, bring it down to the 30-40 level, the level of a child, so that we can protect ourselves. Because if your Lp(a) is high, it means your chances of getting it are really high, of developing it. So we need to, and you do it once. If it's low, then it's low, it's not going to change that much. But if it's high, we cannot take any chances. So any amount of LDL will be bad. We need to really drive that down preventively. So when we talk about, the oxidative stress, how does that come about? Well, here we're talking about people that are pre-diabetic, insulin resistance, and that is a lot of people. A lot of people. We really have to look into this, okay? Because this is the interplay that makes it dangerous. It's when insulin comes to play. It's when glucose comes to play in the game. This is when the cholesterol becomes dangerous. And so what we're going to do now is put up a picture of what happens to the arterial lining. And so you can kind of visualize it. I've talked about it, but I need you to look at it and see it. And look at what stage the oxidative stress comes in, at what stage we have inflammation, what tests we'll do. So when I talked about the ApoB, it's really a test to see, okay, is it coming? It's kind of a preventative test. These other tests that we're looking at are more, okay, we know ApoB is high, we need to do more testing. So we look at LP-PLA2, MPO, and the rest that you see there. These are advanced issues. And when we look at the timeline, and please look at the timeline because this is important. You're looking at 20 to 30 years of development before issues rear their head. So when someone has a heart attack or has a stroke, this has been at least 20 to 30 years in the development. Why did we not catch this before then? And now with what we know, we can catch it before then. But our physicians have to look a little deeper and do a couple more tests every time to look at this. Because the regular tests really are not enough, don't detect the problem. So you can have people with low LDLs that are still at high risk, that are still developing, that are still getting the oxidative stress, that are still getting inflammation in the arteries. And this is dangerous. This is where things go wrong. So when we look at the oxidative stress, which also, by the way, causes insulin resistance, and now I'm going to bring up the latest study, 2022, amazing study, and we're going to it has a lot of information, but the information, and it's going to be up, the information is dissectable. Okay, it's the same thing. You look at the center, you see OS, oxidative stress. Then you go down, you see the inflammation. Then you'll see further the endothelial bifunctions. So you'll look at the same process. Now, if you look up to the left, you're going to see something interesting. Periodontal disease, bacteria in the mouth, causing insulin resistance, causing oxidative stress. So do we have to go to the dentist? Yes, we do. Do we have to get this checked? Yes, we do. Because this is one of the, I mean, it's not a heavy one, but it's there. Insulin on the right, top right, that's the big one. That's the big, if we're pre-diabetic, if we're in that range, if we're just a little in that range, we are already at high risk, and most people are. So we really need to attack this problem. We really need to look at that. We can't just look at our lipid profile and think we're good. No, we need to look at the interplay. Pancreas, liver, insulin, glucose, lipids. And then the protein that wraps around the lipid. And look at oxidative stress, look at inflammation. This is how we get it. So when we come back to, if we look at chronic kidney disease, stress management is also one that's up there. Again, we come back to, so how do we, in the first place, and I've said it before, and maybe I haven't said it, I'll say it now. All this, 90% of everything we've talked about here is preventable. Let me repeat that. 90% of everything we've talked about here is preventable. How? Lifestyle, body fat composition. How much muscle to fat do you have? And we talked about this in the foundation. This is critical. Exercise, specifically what exercise? Diet, dropping the carbohydrates. Sugar, no. Preventable, completely. And there's supplements and there's medication. I mean, if your IP(a) is high, you got to go on medication, preventatively. Statins, right? Talk to your lipidologist, talk to your doctor. Get those down. Do everything to get them down. Because genetically, you're predisposed. If you're not, you need to really have, every time we do a blood test, we need a fasting glucose and we need a fasting insulin. We need to look at those numbers. Those cannot go up because we get into trouble. So it's the major culprit here. We need to look at our liver. Is our liver in good shape? Are we getting fatty liver? That's an indication of what again? Sugar, diet, our body composition. We need to drop fat. This is critical. And I know you know this. I know people have talked about this. But I wanted to combine it with how we screen for this. How we better screen. What labs we really need to be looking at with our physician, so that we can avoid this heart attack, this stroke that comes out of left field. It should never come out of left field. So, and again, I saw it come out of left field with my dad, but back then they didn't know. They were looking at cholesterol and shit. They were looking at LDL, whatever. I mean, they weren't looking at anything. They were freaking in the dark about it. Oh, stop smoking, stop doing, no clue. We've come a long way. Testing has come a long way. And if you want to deep dive yourself, pick up this research that I just showed you. It's from 2022, and it really does the job in explaining how everything works together and what we need to look for. So until next time, stay healthy, be healthy. We're working on lifespan and health span. Take care See you soon on the next episode.